Hi, everybody. Welcome to Thursday. I'm trying to pretend like there's kind of like some semblance of class. So that's why you'll see my lectures on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Speaking of Tuesday's lecture, as you know, whenever our student groups are assigned to post on a particular chapter of the new Jim Crow, that takes the place of the lecture since it's a lecture. And as you can see, Bell Vasco and Rocky have prepared a Zoom based presentation of Chapter 2, and that also comprises our weekly discussion so that we can kind of unpack the ideas that they bring up and correlate it to the way that we read the chapter. And so for that discussion question, again, it's not about adhering to a set of guidelines so that you get a good grade. Okay, please shatter the notion of that. What it is a chance for us to talk about these ideas. So, anything that comes up, like anything of curiosity to you, use the prompt of the discussion questions to allow you to launch into something that is specifically geared around your own interest or fascination. The more we share those ideas, the more we think, the cloud of influence of of the thinking that we do in the class is more robust. Okay. So please don't think that you're just like answering questions. Use them as prompts to shoot off into a direction. All right. With that being said, the readings for Thursday's class, whatever that looks like. Since you've now read chapter 2 of the new Jim Crow, I've asked you to read two pieces, and it's quite a bit of reading, which is why you have through the week to complete it. But it's Kickin' Ballistics, which is an academic essay about South Central Los Angeles in particular, and Anna Deavere Smith's theatrical piece called Twilight Los Angeles. Anna Deavere Smith is one of my great heroes. And fortunately, a couple years ago, she was the Sinatra chair guest artist at Santa Clara. So I got to meet her, which I was very excited about. Anna Deavere Smith is a performance artist. So you're going to notice that Twilight Los Angeles is not like a play, really. It's almost like a poetic monologue, and it's done in many episodes. It's quite a lot of pages, but as you see, it moves very quickly, and we are not beholden strictly to reading the play just straight through. You can almost go to different sections and just read them separately. There is something very collage-like about Deavere Smith's play, performance text, let's call it that. The methodology she uses is ethnographic. And so it's a couple of you are familiar with that. Sahiti, Sienna, you've taken my second section of CTW, where we use ethnographic methodology in order to do our research. Anna Deavere Smith utilizes that to create her creative text, where she observes a community, performs interviews with that community in order to somehow glean the essence of the identities and experiences. And then she transposes those into a creative writing text, and then she typically performs them as well. The methodology she's utilizing is called a reflexive one, which is very common in ethnography. And it's this idea of always being aware of yourself in relation to that which you are observing, especially if it is a marginal community, and how you and your identity and your presence somehow affects the experience, the circumstance, the reality of what it is that you are observing. And so DeVere Smith does this in a masterful way. She's one of the best at it. And Twilight Los Angeles is largely inspired by the race riots of the 60s and then the Rodney King riots, as they're colloquially called. So this is happening in the early 90s, which is at the rise of crime in America. I think 1991 or 1992 is the year that we see the most homicides, for example. And it is also at kind of the pinnacle moment of the war on drugs. And so there's an interesting series of correlations that are happening in this text with what we are talking about in chapter 2 of the New Jim Crow. Again, what we're trying to do is investigate decolonial narratives, meaning narratives that are trying to subvert the dominant or hegemonic structure as a means to complicate history, something we've been talking about for 1.5 quarters, but certainly for this quarter in particular. And we're largely using performance texts. So Anna Deavere Smith's is the latest in that. So we have another response paper. Once again, these response papers, much like the discussions, are to generate your authentic thinking, not to prove that you've read, but they are to, through the experience of you reading, how you are synthesizing these texts so that we can really see how the ideas and theories that we are examining in the scholarly texts are then somehow being illustrated or transposing or even transmuting into the creative texts. That is the goal. And like, what happens as a result? What thoughts come into our mind? The same is going to be true for response paper 2, which is you looking at Anna Deavere Smith's Twilight Los Angeles and looking at chapter 2 of the New Jim Crow, maybe even throwing in there any of the information from Kickin' Ballistics and mashing it all up and thinking about like what ideas come to mind? What thoughts come into your head? Let's think about them. Okay? You're placing these ideas in conversation with one another. And through that, we make discoveries because we have our own authentic way of thinking. And that's what we want to look at. We don't want a series of automatons saying, Anna Deavere Smith's text is reflecting Alexander's text through blah, 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 blah. Great, everyone can do that. It's more, how are you synthesizing these texts? Obviously, demonstrate your scholarly ability to identify specifically elements of the text that make you think those things. Yes, cite where you're getting your material from. It's really important to do that. That's just scholarly ethics, and the more you practice doing it and the better you get at it, the more successful you'll be for the rest of your college career. But ultimately, the exciting thing is that you're taking two elements of text that you have intuitively read and made a connection, and then you're coming up with a new idea, or you're coming up with an idea that is authentically yours. Let's celebrate that. That is where you want to go with this. Again, it further kind of creates a cloud of influence around the way that we are responding to these texts. And isn't that why we write? So that we can navigate the various complexities of thinking, the way that people perceive, and to further complicate our own perspective so that it's not so singularly minded, right? That it involves complexity. Yes. All right. So you're going to be doing that for the remainder of this week. Notice I changed a couple due dates just because I wanted to make sure that you had time to work on the response paper. So I gave you till the rest of the weekend to do that. Just because, things can compound themselves and it's quite a bit of reading. And I want to make sure that you're able to do it and to do it well. for next week. Um, Obviously, we're going to be looking at the next chapter of the new Jim Crow. We're going to be reading another play, and this is a very contemporary one called Sleep Deprivation Chamber, which is super interesting. And we also are going to be working on the development for our very first formal essay, which involves investigating a Black stereotype, or a stereotype that is either proliferated within the Black community itself or within a hegemonic society at large. It's a very uncomfortable topic because I am asking you all to identify a stereotype of Blackness or a stereotype of the Black community or Black individuation and investigate to figure out where it comes from. And then ultimately to make determinations about how stereotype even comes about, like what makes stereotype occur. So we're going to be looking life a little bit in the face, and that's what can be a little bit discomforting. So at the very beginning of next week, we're going to brainstorm and throw out a whole bunch of stereotypes that we are familiar with, that we've heard, that we've seen, maybe even perpetuated, and through that have a big list that you all can choose from. We will do that for Tuesday's lecture, but please read the prompt for essay number 1, just so that you're familiar with it. You can start kind of brainstorming on your own. And then for the discussion early next week, we'll throw all of these perceived stereotypes out there as a way to collectively brainstorm as a class so that we can get you on your way with this first formal essay. Until then, enjoy Anna Deavere Smith. Enjoy the scholarly article on kicking ballistics. Try to come up with some fascination for yourself with response paper number 2, and have a wonderful weekend.